This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions.
So welcome to this week's show. Please relax, get yourself something to drink and some cake or a Twinkie. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me for our discussion about loneliness. In the first half, Charlie presents our recipe of the week, which is almond $1 cookies. In the second half, we talk about the epidemic of loneliness and the effect it can have on our health. And in the third half, Charlie updates us about the current must-see TV. So, was it last week we were talking about Narcan, Charlie?
Yeah.
And I had said that I had ordered the Narcan kit. And I don't know, I was kind of wondering if it was going to come. Well, oh my gosh, within a week, it was here, and it was in a plain brown envelope. And in it were...
there we are. That's always a little suspicious, yeah.
Well, I was like, what is this? And in it were two, black Ziploc bags, protected from the light, with two syringes and a bottle of Narcan. And, instructions and all of that. So I'm living proof that all you have to do is order it, and they will send it to you. And keep it in the bottom of your purse or the bottom of your backpack or somewhere where you'll have access to it if you run into somebody who's overdosing.
Now, exactly, for the overdose, and not that you need to explain it to me, but just in case there are some listeners who didn't listen last week, what's a Narcan kit?
Well, it's the medicine that will reverse an opioid overdose. And to Charlie's point, if you haven't listened, I think you should.
Yes,
and then order your
I
kit
agree.
And save a life or many.
Yeah. Well, I have something to munch on. One day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking something up and gently throwing it into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "What are you doing?" The youth replied, "Throwing sand dollars back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." "Son," the man said, "don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of sand dollars? You can't make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another sand dollar, and threw it back into the surf. Then, smiling at the man, he said, "I made a difference for that one." I love that. That's wonderful. So for those of us dedicated to public service, the sand dollar story is the standard call to duty. Knowing that each life you touch matters, even if it is only one. This is true about today's topic, loneliness. If our actions make one person less lonely, then we are doing a service to that person and to society. You can make a difference. Maybe you can make our recipe of the week to share with someone who is lonely. We have almond $1 cookies that would make a great addition to your next funeral lunch or as a gift. These cookies are a cross between a sugar cookie and snickerdoodles. Voila.
That sounds like a good plan. You're going to bake and send some to your neighbors, Charles?
Oh, yeah. As soon as we finish recording, I'm running out to my local grocery store and, who's kidding who? No, I'm not. but actually, I used to make cookies and stuff like that.
You did?
Yeah. I mean, years ago now.
Huh.
I haven't done that in a while. Maybe something to consider.
Yeah. And then, you know my address. Anybody who needs my address after they bake cookies or anything, just, send us an email. I'll be happy to I don't know, but what if they put like something in them? Or what if they didn't,
Please go to our webpage for this recipe and additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. Mother Teresa once said that loneliness and the feeling of being unwanted is the most terrible poverty. As humans, we thrive on meaningful social connections. Feelings of loneliness set in when there's a difference between one's desired and one's actual level of social relationships. Loneliness is the feeling of being alone, regardless of the amount of social contact. Social isolation is a lack of social connections. You can be in a relationship and be extremely lonely, or you can be alone and be perfectly happy and not have the sense of loneliness. So loneliness can be defined as a negative personal experience closely linked to the quality of social connections. Loneliness is different from social isolation, which is defined as a lack of social contacts, and being alone considered as being physically removed from social connections. Brief loneliness is a common experience, but constant or severe loneliness poses threats to health and well-being. There's growing evidence has linked to loneliness to various poor health outcomes, such as negative cardiovascular health indicators, such as high blood pressure, increased cholesterol levels, and coronary heart disease. Social isolation significantly increased a person's risk for a premature death from all causes, a risk that may rival those of smoking, obesity, and physical activity. And that's really saying something. Poor social relationships, which are characterized by social isolation or loneliness, were associated with 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Loneliness among heart failure patients was associated with nearly 4 times an increased risk of death, 68% increased risk of hospitalization, and a 57% increased risk of emergency department visits. Lacking connection can increase the risk for premature death to levels comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, according to a new advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General. Loneliness is associated with sleep disturbances and a 50% increased risk of dementia. It may also be detrimental to behavioral, mental, and social health throughout the lifespan, influencing outcomes such as substance misuse, thinking about or committing suicide, anxiety, depression, and poor personal well-being. According to a 2015 meta-analysis, people with chronic loneliness had a 28% increased risk of mortality. This increased risk is comparable to established risk factors such as physical inactivity and grade 1 obesity. Culture affects the levels of loneliness. There is one theoretical model that suggests that risk factors such as age interact with triggering events such as retirement, which results in feelings of loneliness. Loneliness is increasingly recognized as an important health and social issue, with some health professionals, including former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, labeling it as an epidemic. In 2018, the United Kingdom appointed the world's first Minister of Loneliness. Worldwide initiatives have been launched to address the epidemic of loneliness. With loneliness now defined as a public health problem, tackling it requires public health approaches, which begin with defining the magnitude and distribution of the problem through investigation. A recent estimate suggests that 1/3 of the population in industrialized countries experience loneliness, and that 1 in 12 people experience loneliness at a problematic level. However, the basis of this estimate is unclear. Understanding the prevalence of loneliness globally can help decision makers gauge the scope and severity of the problem. A report by Harvard University researchers finds that 36% of Americans are experiencing serious loneliness. And some groups, such as young adults and mothers with small children, are especially isolated. Young adults are the loneliest group. According to research findings, 61% of young people ages 18 to 25 reported feeling lonely frequently or almost all of the time or all the time during the 4 weeks preceding the survey. 43% of these young adults indicated that their loneliness had increased since the pandemic and related lockdowns began. These results echo similar findings of other Harvard researchers who found that nearly half of young adults were showing signs of depression amid the pandemic response. And in August, the CDC reported that 1 in 4 young adults in this age group had contemplated suicide during the month of June. 25%, Charlie? 1 in 4?
1 in 4, yeah.
Research findings have documented that loneliness was worsening prior to the pandemic. There was a joint Kaiser Family Foundation and Economist survey of 3 countries. They surveyed the U.S., the UK, and Japan. And they found that 1 in 5 Americans often or almost always felt lonely or socially isolated. Americans who felt lonely or socially isolated often report negative impacts on their mental health, 58%, physical health, 55%, personal relationships, 49%, ability to do their job, 33%. Some also say that it led them to think about harming themselves, 31%, or committing a violent act, 15%. The survey also finds that while 58% of Americans view the increased use of technology as a major reason why people feel lonely and socially isolated, those who report feeling lonely or socially isolated are divided on the impact of social media. About as many say using social media such as Facebook, Snapchat, and Twitter have made their feelings of loneliness better, 31%, and worse, 27%, which there's probably not a significant difference between those two. So it's like the sword that cuts both ways. So other findings from this study are that loneliness appears to be closely tied to real-life problems and circumstances, with at least 6 in 10 of those experiencing it across the 3 countries citing a specific cause, most often the death of a loved one. Those who feel lonely are much more likely to report a negative change in financial status, a change in living situation, a serious illness or injury, a loss of a job in the past 2 years than those who don't report feeling lonely across all 3 countries. In the United States, those most likely to experience loneliness include people who report having a mental health condition, 47%, or a debilitating health condition, 45%. That's roughly 3 times the rates for those who don't have these conditions. Similarly, Americans who are single, divorced, widowed, or separated are more than twice as likely to report feeling lonely or socially isolated than those who are married or living with a partner, 33% compared to 13%. The pattern is similar in the UK and Japan. Across countries, large majorities of people say individuals and families should play a major role in helping to reduce loneliness and social isolation in society today. However, just about a quarter of Americans, 27%, say the government should play a major role, less than half who say the same in the UK and Japan. Most Americans, 61%, also see a major role for churches and other religious institutions. It was kind of interesting with those numbers is that people aren't saying that families should be stepping up and have a role in people's loneliness, that it's all external, which is a change, and I don't know, we can talk about whether or not it's a good one. A Gallup poll survey released in October of 2023 documented that of 142 countries, 24% of people aged 15 and older self-reported feeling very or fairly lonely in response to the question, how lonely do you feel? That's nearly 1 in 4 adults across the world that have reported feeling very or fairly lonely. The survey also found that rates of loneliness were highest in young adults, with 27% of young adults ages 19 to 29 reporting feeling very or fairly lonely. The lowest rates were found in older adults, where 17% of people ages 65 and older reported feeling very lonely. And so, the conventional wisdom is that, our poor old people are just so lonely. But the data doesn't support that. We're doing just fine. And, I don't know how much of that is, when we were kids, we were certainly, my mother would say, go outside and amuse yourself.
Yeah.
if there was somebody to play with, that was fine. If not, get some twigs and a rock and go do something.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes.
We were responsible for kind of our own, if you will, happiness in those situations. And I don't know that that's the case with kids anymore. Is that, actually, I kind of know that it's not, in that, if the kids say they're lonely or they're bored, the parents will typically step in, or I've seen this thing now. Yep. I know I sound like such an old lady when I say this. In the airport, where kids will have like these really like heavy duty little, computer screens, what are they called? And they have their headphones. And when the kids would act out, I've seen parents are like, pull these out, hand them their, their little pad and their headphones.
Tablets or pads or whatever, yes.
Yeah. And or they hand them their phone, and like little kids are swiping and doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm thinking, well, that's just another way of isolating. I had a supervisor back in the 80s when I was working in mental health who would say that he wouldn't allow headphones on the unit. People weren't allowed, the patients or staff, nobody was allowed to use headphones. And he said they're too isolating. When you put a headphone in, you block everybody else out. And if you're on a mental health ward, that's not what you really should be doing. You need to be interacting with people. But think about how many people who, just walk around with headphones, and if you try to talk to them, they kind of like cock their head, pull the headphone down, like, well, what do you want? It's like, dude, you're out in the world, Sorry if I'm interrupting you, but whatever. So that's my little tyrant for that. Over half of adults aged 45 and older reported not feeling lonely at all, with a majority of those younger than 45 answered that they felt at least a little lonely, if not very or fairly lonely. These data are a good reminder that loneliness is not just a problem of aging, it's a problem that it can affect anyone at any age. While there was little or no difference in the reported loneliness between men and women, some countries had substantial gaps in both directions, depending on the cultural perspective. Overall, 79 out of the 142 countries had a higher self-reported rate of loneliness in women than men. And I would think in part some of that is that men tend to die younger. And so for the men, typically they'll have their wives or partner, until the end of their life, but women then are left alone. We could talk these survey results for hours, at least I could, because, I'm a nerd, but all that does is tell us that there is a widespread loneliness problem in the world. It's worthwhile to remember that being alone does not necessarily mean loneliness. Social media is often a tool young adults use to connect with one another, but it can be more harmful than it is good if users are participating in what's called passive scrolling. The behavior is only taking in the favorable posts of others and comparing it to your own reality. So if all you're doing is looking at all these people in relationships, having babies, going on incredible vacations and all of that, and you look at yourself in your, one-bedroom apartment, whatever it is your situation, you compare yourself and you say, oh my God, everybody else in the world is doing so much better than I am. But all you're seeing is what people are showing you, which is not the whole reality. Actively engaging by sharing a status update or a picture, or interacting with a friend's posts, or sending a private message to a friend is less isolating. We have a pretty big following on Facebook and Instagram, and follow us there, interact with us, send us cartoons, ask us questions. We'll be unlonely together. You can interact with us and not be lonely. You can look for opportunities to reduce everyday loneliness in your life and for other people through social connections. The U.S. Surgeon General published a report in 2023 called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation, with really good information and graphics. In the overview, it reviews factors that can shape social connections. There are individual factors such as chronic disease, gender, life stage, relationships such as household size, empathy, and behaviors of others, community, which includes outdoor space, local government, and businesses. And I don't know if you would see this in New York, Charlie, but I'll tell you, in Oklahoma, the last few years, there's been this really big push to build sidewalks. And you could look at it and you'd say, well, what's the point of a sidewalk? Well, there was a study actually the University of Oklahoma was involved in about exercise. And one of the variables was, were there, a safe place to walk? Were there safe sidewalks? Oh. And here there's like grass and then the road. And so there's not a safe place to walk or ride your bike or do things like that. And I used to ride my bike. You're not going to, you'll believe this, in the cemetery that was down the street because it was a safe place to ride. And I didn't have to worry about, like cars trying to sideswipe me or something. So I would, ride to the cemetery, but then spend my whole time riding up and down the streets of the cemetery. And, of course, you've got to know, I would talk and say hi to the people that were buried there. But that's a whole other story. But think also of sidewalks when we were growing up. I lived in, these planned neighborhoods of the Midwest where there was, sidewalks on both sides of the street, and all the houses, the streets were exactly the same number. The grid planning that they did after World War II. And you could walk around the block. You could ride your bike around the block, and people would sit out on their porch and they would talk to you, or you could stop and talk to them. And all you had to do was walk around your block, and there were people there.
Yeah.
If you don't have sidewalks, you can't do that. So the sidewalks, sort of have a dual purpose. If you look at historically, they'll say that, fireplaces being built inside of homes really changed the American family. And what they meant by this is that if all you had for light was your fireplace and all you had for warmth was your fireplace, your family gathered around the fireplace and did your reading or needlework or whatever, but you were all together because you were around that fireplace. Once, though, they were able to put a fireplace in different parts of the house or even upstairs in bedrooms, people could scatter. People could go about their own business and not be engaged so intimately with the family. And I know that was true even in modern America with television. Once when you had one TV like we did growing up, you all watched it. You negotiated the favorite shows that you were going to watch. You talked to each other about the shows. You ran to the bathroom really quick or fought with each other to get into the one bathroom really quick during commercials.
Right. During the commercials, right.
But once your second TV showed up, which was that mark of affluence in the suburbs, was, we got this small second TV in the basement. Well, that allowed the family to divide. And, they could send the kids downstairs to watch TV. And it was really never the same because, the adults could be watching something. You could be in, the basement watching something else. And you weren't all together fighting over, the bathroom or the best seat in front of the TV or whatever much it was. And, to take that one step further, I can remember, when computers came out, I had a homework center for the kids. There was one computer. It was right across from my kitchen. I could see what was going on. I could see what they were doing. And that computer was hardwired. It didn't move. Well, when they got to high school, the high school required that all the kids would get iPads. It was required. They all had to have them. Some of their books were on their iPads. Their homework was there. And that was the end, really, of that control over what they were doing. They could go and isolate in their rooms if they didn't want to be with us. And they could say, this socially acceptable thing of, well, I've got homework. Who knows, what they were doing,
Yeah.
But they were savvy enough that, if I came in, that they switched it over back to their homework. But it was really hard to get them back out of their rooms to come watch a show with me, come do this. It's like, oh, but we have homework, we have to do this. And I really kind of felt bad that's the trajectory of what that was. So you can see how from fireplaces to multiple TVs to iPads, things can change that leave you increasingly isolated, even though you've got this great technology. So besides our own personal responsibility to initiate conversations with people and open ourselves to being more sociable within our communities, perhaps we should consider the ways to bring people together in some of the ways of the past. I don't know if that would work, but Charlie, what do you think? What kind of ideas do you have to address the issue of loneliness that's epidemic in the world?
How much time do you got? Yeah, cheapers. And actually, I love that trajectory you made from, fireplaces, or even just, people gather, from fireplaces to then and that light, if you will, and then jump forward to the radio where people would sit around listening to that. And then the next step, people sitting around listening to watching, TV together. And now to your point, what you were saying, people isolate, with any sort of, video device. To the point where, and I'm sure it's there too, Marianne, I see people walking down the sidewalk, getting to reaching a corner on their phones, just crossing the street, not looking up to see if it's your turn to go or not. It's insane. I don't understand that. It's just about that isolation, and I understand. There are times, I'll sit in front of my iPhone or a pad or something, but I'm really engaged in reading something or finding some history of something or watching some old program, and then I have no problem shutting the thing off. And but so many people, it's just it becomes not a tool that helps you, not even that helps you. A tool that just, you enjoy using, but it becomes you. Like you said, there are so many people isolated and just is loneliness, boredom, and people just take their cues, especially younger people, from what other people say about them, or instead of. Yeah, it's just really frustrating.
Well, it feels like an addiction. Like they have to have the phone in their hand. And my kids will say, "Mom, you're so irresponsible with your phone." What they mean is, I put my phone down and I do stuff. 9 times out of 10, I don't know where I put it down, but that's another story. But if they want to text me, I'm not holding the phone in my hand, so I won't even see the text for hours. And I always say, if you want to talk to me, call me. Well, we'll do a show sometime about etiquette and phones, because there's this there's this whole new etiquette about it, but we'll go into that some other time. But, I don't need to be holding it in my hand. But I remember going out with a guy once. Yeah. He had left his phone somewhere. Maybe if he left it at my house or his house or something, I don't know. And he said, "I have to go get my phone." And I said, "Well, what do you need it for?" I mean, we're out at a bar listening to a band. "Well, I just have to have my phone." And I kind of looked at him like, he left, went home, and got his phone and came back. And I thought, that is just bizarre. It's just bizarre to me. But it's just a different generation. I have to stop going out with 21-year-olds is really the problem, Charlie.
Well, there you are right there. Yes.
Yep.
And it's funny, to that point, once in a while, I walk out the door and then I realize, oh shit, I left the phone. And there were a couple of times I went back for it, but then it was, I don't know, like the third or fourth time I would go back for the phone, and it's like, why? Why do you need this? And I really had to stop and just ask myself, okay, what's going to happen if you don't have that phone? Because I'm not alone in this. I just created this, thought, this image, I guess almost a need. I have to have that phone. I have to know where it is. No, I don't. So like what you say, I'll just put it down. I mean, I'll have I'll make sure that if I hear a bing or something, fine, but I don't, like Pavlov's dog. There we are.
You salivate every time you ding?
Yeah, there we are. Exactly, yes. It's not. But just your whole point about, isolation and loneliness, I just remembered if I was bored and I would, say to my mother, "I'm bored," I mean, she'd look at me like I was nuts, like, "Aunt, what do you expect me to do?" Whereas today,
when my kids said that to me, I would say, "Oh, well, come here. We can wash these windows. We could do this. We could do that." And they learned very quickly not to tell Mom that they were bored, because it wouldn't last long and it wouldn't be necessarily the things that they wanted to be doing. So they learned to figure it out for themselves.
Well, that's the thing. Most people, and again, I'm sorry, but especially younger people, have not learned just to be by themselves. And this whole thing of loneliness is, of epic proportions.
Or even reading a book. If I have a good book, I'm so perfectly happy.
Yeah.
And the whole time that I'm reading it, and I'll, sometimes miss the characters after they're gone, after I'm done. But I can't tell you how many people will say to me, "Oh, I don't read." And it's like, to me, it's like saying you don't breathe. How can you not read? But people don't.
People don't.
So.
And also to that point, I was in a Zoom or something thing several weeks ago, and someone mentioned an article about that people were that people couldn't write, cursive writing.
Oh, yeah.
So we all laughed, and then somebody took out pencil and paper and said, "Oh my God, how do you spell F?" And so we all laughed, and then all of us just started to write. Marianne, I could not finish the damn alphabet. I'd forgotten.
Come on.
Oh, shut up. No, really, I apart from my name, like writing my name, I either print or I text. And I was like, holy shit! I'm back at it now. I'm fine now, but Marianne, I could not get through to write the entire alphabet.
Wow.
It was nuts.
Did you go to Catholic school? The nuns would have whacked you
I
upside
remember
the head.
that. Are you kidding?
And it had to be perfect handwriting.
Oh, absolutely. And it had to stay within the lines. I remember all that. Yeah.
My daughter says, "Oh, you have such nice handwriting." It's like, yeah. Ask me how much I bled. The nuns beat me up for this.
Yeah, you see, and that's the thing. When all of us saw, wow, how do you write a G in cursive, for example? It was nice because then all of us were inspired to pick up a pen, pick up paper, and practice this instead of just throwing our hands up in the air and like, oh well, it's. And I see that's a lot of that is just missing. I have to deal with a lot of young people also, and it's just a different time. It's a different mentality. If you can't get it on your immediately on some screen, it's either not worth it, or it's just one more peg in that world of isolation.
Mm-hmm. Or you sit there and wait for them to Google whatever it is because you say, "Oh, who was in that TV show?" And instead of like having a conversation about the different people or, how we go off in so many different directions. The kids will just Google it. Oh, it was so-and-so. It's like, okay. I mean, it's like not as much fun necessarily to know the answer.
Yeah, and I can, to that end, because most of my friends are older, and even younger friends I have, are pretty well educated. It's okay because we're talking, we're trying to remember something. One of us will quickly whip out a phone, or just on the phone, so my phone, and find an answer. Oh yeah, it's so and so, and then the conversation continues. So as a tool like that, it's nice, but. No, I know what you're saying. It's like, oh, you don't want to take 10 seconds to try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which I miss. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So, with that, with older, being older and loneliness and all that sort of stuff, are you familiar with the show, Marianne, The Bachelor?
Well. Unfortunately, my girls love it.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I don't know that I've ever I'd sit down and watch part of it, but it kind of makes me a little insane. So, yeah. But to answer your question, I'm familiar.
Well, and that's the same with me. I've never. I did sit down once with a couple of people to look through it, and it's like. Oh no! And then Saturday Night Live used to do skits about this. That I found very funny. But yeah, just a regular show. I haven't really cared for it. But there's a new twist on The Bachelor. It's called The Golden Bachelor, and it features Jerry Turner, a charming 72-year-old patriarch from Indiana, as the first Golden Bachelor, showcasing that love stories only get better with age. But I have to tell you, China has beat us in that department. And you know what? Before I go further into this, the other thing too that I have found, Mr. Turner is very charming, very handsome man. The ladies who are all, after him, also charming, also lovely. Yeah, it's something out of central casting. I'm sorry, most of my friends, my older friends, I like them, but very few of us are, well, none of us are that, good looking
Well, wait.
and even less
I am.
charming. And
I am.
well, that's why I said most. Of course, you are not included in that list.
All right. Let's just be clear that I'm
Yeah.
charming and gorgeous.
But the thing of it is, in this show, and I saw a lot of it like online. It's like these are not real people. Just like in the original Bachelor things, I mean, to me, these are not real people. And then what made me nervous is, oh my God, yes, these are real people. This is what our society is going toward. Driving over the cliff. In my humble opinion, ladies and gentlemen. So back to the show. So yeah, Jerry Turner, the Golden Bachelor, but China has us beat in that department in love stories about elders. The New York Times ran an article stating that China has at least 10 shows that feature older Chinese people over 50 that are helping to encourage conversations about social, romantic, and sexual needs of older Chinese people. In between the lighthearted flirtations, the programs also tackle some of the heavier realities of China's rapidly aging population, 1/3 of which is expected to be 60 or older by 2050. All guests are asked about their health and pensions. Often participants are startlingly blunt about what drove them to the stage. A widower recalls tender memories of his deceased wife. A divorced woman describes a loneliness so deep that she started talking to her television. Most of all, the shows are helping to encourage more conversations about the social, romantic, and sexual needs of older people. In China, as in many parts of the world, ageism has long made those topics taboo. In Chinese society in particular, many older people are expected to put the needs of younger generations first. Children often worry that a parent's decision to oppose tradition and seek companionship later in life could harm their own social standing or prospects at work. The problem of loneliness among older Chinese has become increasingly urgent over the years. Many Chinese who once relied on their children to support them in their old age now live alone because of rapid urbanization and economic development that have led their children to move away. The decades-long one policy also meant there are fewer children to provide companionship. More than 54 million people 65 and older are unmarried, divorced, or widowed, according to China's most recent census data. Care and Love is one of the longest-running dating shows for older Chinese. The program has a game show quality, with contestants dancing or arm wrestling, while potential mates press buttons to indicate approval or disapproval. The newer Not Too Late is more intimate, with candidates visiting each other's homes. On an episode of Not Too Late, a 69-year-old man asked a 63-year-old woman, "Let me just ask, we are both experienced people. How's your sexual ability?" "Not bad," she giggled. Ms. Ye, a widowed contestant, appeared on Care and Love in 2020. Since her husband and 24-year-old son had both died in 2012, Ms. Ye from the northern city of Chichikhar had longed for companionship, but did not know how to find it, she said in an interview. She was delighted to secure a spot on the show, and when her turn came, pleasantly surprised that Mr. Lie said he did not mind she was 2 years older. The two walked off stage as a couple. But soon, practical considerations, amplified by old age, intruded. They lived too far apart, and his home was on the 5th floor, to which she did not want to climb, she said. There was also a more timeless problem. He was talking to another woman. They called it off.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. When Chang Jinghua, a 64-year-old farmer from rural Harbin, appeared on Care and Love last year, he was so nervous that his legs shook. he recalled. His brother's family had disapproved of him looking for a partner after his wife of more than 30 years died in 2017. Mr. Chan said on the show that he just wanted someone to make dumplings with. He did not match with anyone during this episode, but the producers later broadcast his phone number and he received more than 200 calls.
Wow. That's like that. Did you ever see that documentary by Jeff, what's his name? Who was on Curb Your Enthusiasm. He did a film called I Just Want Someone to Eat Cheese With.
I see the actor's face. I do not remember his name, but I know who you mean. Yes.
But that film was great. And I've always thought about that when I was dating. It was like, I just want someone to eat cheese with. You know, like this guy just wants someone to make dumplings with. You know, it's the little things, right?
I agree. And it's great. I mean, just to momentarily go back to the thing about loneliness, and it's just nice because at this age, sometimes you just want to hang out at a bar with just me and a book, and other times just with, a friend or two, and just that's the moment. Just to have that moment. It doesn't have to, be the end all be all of something. It's just to have those moments. Yeah, I agree. So, to avoid this gentleman's family's and neighbors' gossip, he would sneak away to meet callers he was interested in. He had not yet found a long-term partner, he said earlier this year. But when he did, he would bring her home with his head held high. Once I succeed, why wouldn't I dare come back, he said with a laugh. What would I have to fear?
But fear itself.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting that it's taken the U.S. this long to do a Golden Bachelor when China's been doing this for so long.
Oh, I don't find it strange at all. I mean, we are such a youth-oriented society.
Yeah, but look how many boomers there are that are old, that are, looking for love in all the wrong places or whatever. I mean, we are the boomers. We are have influenced everything in American culture since we've been born. I mean, why not this?
And as much as ageism is out there, and really, folks, we don't tolerate racism or sexism. Please remember, ageism, no, bad, don't do it. And if somebody just keeps looking at you or considering you as someone old, feel free to confront them on it. But it is nice that with our generation, people are more active and people are finding ways to amuse themselves. I mean, there is an epidemic of loneliness in America, but it's nice that people not everyone just succumbs to that, and people, create their own worlds.
There's pickleball. Got it?
Yeah. All right, this pickleball thing. So what? This is basically ping pong on a tennis court. Am I right here? I don't get it.
It's a smaller court,
right?
And it's sort of like ping pong, but it's a way that you've got to be in good shape to play tennis and play on that big court like that. Where on the smaller court, you could drink and manage and talk to each other and manage yourselves on that smaller court. So, yeah, it's sort of a social phenomenon among
you
primarily
had me a
older
drink.
people.
Yeah, you had me a drink, so okay, I'm in. I'll go try this and hopefully not trip over my sneakers. So, with that, that's the end of this week's episode. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete. Film director Martin Scorsese now thinks about his mortality all the time. A great collector of films and books, they all have to go away, he said, adding, once you know that you got to let go and you're going to die, everything changes.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.